this video, we're going to learn the layout of the sales screen, how to enter an invoice, the different fields that make up the new invoice screen, and how to add defaults such as tax treatment and due dates. I'm going to be using Xero's new invoicing feature for this demonstration. At some point, the new invoice feature will be the default and classic invoicing will be phased out. So if you're still using classic invoicing, best to switch over to new invoicing so you can get used to it, as the layout is quite different. I suggest practicing it in the demo company first, then using it in your own organisation. You can always switch back if you need to. Starting from the dashboard. The sales screen is where you'll find all your invoices. To get to this screen, you go to Business, Invoices. Your invoices are conveniently divided into tabs, the most important being the Draft tab, where your invoices that haven't been approved or sent yet sit. Awaiting payment, where your approved and sent invoices that haven't been paid sit. Note: if you haven't done your bank reconciliation, invoices may have actually been paid, but will remain in this tab until you do your bank rec. And paid. These are invoices that have been marked as paid or reconciled to bank statement lines. So, to create a new invoice, we can click this New Invoices button here. So we're now in the New Invoices screen, and I'm going to create an invoice for a new customer. Our first field is the contact field, who we are going to make our invoice out to. Bear in mind, every time you create a transaction in Xero, you are able to create a new contact. So be careful not to create double ups. You want all your transaction information under just one contact. So to find an existing contact, you would type in the first few letters of their name and select them from the list of suggestions that comes up. For this example though, I'm going to create a new contact. The great thing about the new invoicing feature is when you add a new contact, you can enter all their details on the fly, which you can't with classic invoicing. So I'm going to go ahead and add their details. And then I click this Save button. Next is the reference field, which is for any optional references you need or want to add to the invoice. Next is the invoice number field, and Xero auto-generates the invoice number for you. The issue date is the invoice date, which will default to today's date, but you can change it using the drop-down arrow here. The due date is again defaulting to today's date, but if you click this down arrow, you will see a list of common due dates that you can select from, or you can choose a date using this calendar. I'm going to choose the 20th of the month following. Note, you can set up default due dates for all your invoices in the Invoice Settings screen. So if you are the type of organisation that always has a due date of the 20th of the month following, you can set your invoices up to always default to this by going to the Invoice Settings screen. You can also set due dates for individual contacts in the Contact screen, which we'll look at later. Online Payments is a Pay Now button you can add to your online invoices so that people can pay by credit card. We're going to look more in depth at this later. Our next field is Currency. So if you're on the premium plan, you will have the multi-currency feature, so you can make invoices out in different currencies. The branding theme is the invoice template, and we'll look at this in more detail a bit later. Now we're going to enter the details of the invoice. You'll see this layout is quite different to the classic invoicing. The fields have basically been condensed. So when you click into the item description field, if you have untracked inventory entered in products and services, the list of these will automatically pop up for you to choose from. Reminder, untracked inventory is where you can enter the complete details of items you commonly invoice to make data entry quicker. We'll look more on how to set this up in the 201 course. So to demonstrate, I'm going to choose an item from the list, desktop email support via phone. So we see that all the data has pre-populated according to what is in the untracked inventory. And you'll see here is where the chart of account code is. Here we have the tax rate for the line item. And here we have the tracking field, which won't display unless you have tracking categories set up. We'll look more at tracking categories in the 201 course. So if you don't have untracked inventory set up, you would simply click into this field and start typing the description of your line item. So I'm going to add monthly Microsoft Office subscription. And then I'm going to go down and select the chart of account code. The tax rate will default to whatever is set for the chosen chart of account code. And I'm going to charge for one at $150. And there we go. If you want to change the order that your line items appear, you can hover your mouse over this rectangle of dots and then drag and drop to your desired order. If you want to add a discount to a line item, you first have to enter the line item details and then click this meatball menu on the right hand side and select Add Discount. You then type in the percentage of the discount. So I'm going to give a 25% discount. And there it is. If you need to remove a line item because it is a mistake, you also can click this meatball menu on the right hand side and click Remove. And now if we go down here to see the subtotal and total, we see here there is a drop down arrow showing us the tax treatment of the whole invoice. Right now it is tax inclusive, but I want it to calculate the unit prices as tax exclusive. So I select excluding. Note, you can set the default tax treatment for all your invoices by going to Settings, Advanced Settings, Financial Settings. And here we see tax defaults for sales. At the moment it is set to based on last sale, but if you always want your invoices to be calculating as tax exclusive, then you would select tax exclusive and then click Save. Then every invoice you create will calculate as tax exclusive. But if you need to change it for an individual invoice, you can on the invoice here, as I just showed you before. Here on the left-hand side, we can attach a file to the transaction. You may want to use this feature to attach documents to the invoice that are relevant to the organisation internally. They will only be seen within your Xero. Or we can choose to send our upload with our online invoice. And I'll be talking about online invoices in a later video. For example, you may want to send some terms and conditions with your invoice. So to send it with the invoice, we have to switch on this Send with Invoice option. Otherwise, it won't send with the invoice and it will remain in your Xero attached to the transaction. Now, just a few notes about this whole screen. New invoicing has an autosave feature, meaning if something goes wrong, like your internet connection drops out, you won't lose your work, unlike with classic invoicing. With the autosave feature, the invoice is saved in the drafts folder until you approve it. So, if you create the invoice and then come back to it later, or accidentally click out of it whilst you're working on it, you'll find it in the Draft tab because it's been auto-saved. You can also change the layout of this screen by selecting fields you do and don't want to see. You can do this by clicking this meatball menu and selecting Change Invoice Fields. For example, if you never enter a reference on your invoices, you can choose to not see this field by deselecting this box. And then that field will no longer display, making your screen a little less crowded. Note though that this doesn't change the way the invoice displays to your customer, so the word reference will still appear on the customer's invoice. You'll see that the tax amount is showing on my invoice because I chose it to by selecting this box here. But it may not do so for you. However, I strongly suggest selecting to show the tax amount field so you can check the tax is correct on each line item. So, if this tax amount field isn't showing in your screen, go to the meatball menu here, click Change Invoice Fields and select the tax amount box. Then click Save. And that is how the new invoice screen works and how to enter an invoice.